Welcome to the Envisioner's Journey. I am Sherelle Bates. In this podcast, we believe in helping people prepare their minds and shape their thinking so that they are constantly progressing forward. I am specifically speaking to people who haven't figured out what's next, people who have lost their identity, possibly because of their commitments with their family or significant other, to their work, or even to just life circumstances, and a person who has figured it out, but they still haven't pressed go. They are on the fence. The Envisioner's Journey seeks to bring you stories and experts to inspire you to action. So today, I would like to ask, how could challenging yourself expose your true capabilities? Sometimes people may only embrace what they know in a given moment. They disregard the infinite possibilities to remain comfortably in a state where they are conscious of every variable. Yet, surprisingly, what's possible is never limited solely to the things that you are aware of. By embracing unexpected challenges, you can discover new interests and develop new abilities. As you further explore what's possible, obstacles that were once intimidating become catalysts for invaluable life experiences. Today's guest, Donald James, offers the perfect example of this concept. During our conversation, he shared some lessons he learned during his very unexpected career at NASA. Through his story, you'll see why we can never know what we're truly capable of until we actually challenge ourselves to enter into uncharted territory. Let's get into the episode. I am excited as always, but I'm super excited about today's guest. Donald James began his 35-year NASA career at the Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland as a presidential management intern. In 1984, he transferred to NASA's Ames Research Center in Northern California, serving in various positions of increasing responsibilities in public affairs, government relations, and education. He is also the author of the award winning book, Manners Will Take You Where Brains and Money Won't: Lessons from 35 Years at NASA and Mama's Wisdom. The book merges lessons he's learned at NASA with timeless wisdom from his mother to help students and early career professionals navigate their future. Welcome, Donald. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much, Cheryl, and I'm just grateful for this opportunity and excited to talk to you.
So when I heard your story, I really enjoyed it. We talk on this podcast a lot about the envisioner's journey, and it usually works from the
Yeah,
framework of anything is possible. Follow your nagging, that thing that's inside of you. Some people call it purpose, and it has an appointed time. And when I heard your story, I heard all of those pieces in the
yes.
envisioner's journey. So let's just start there. Can you just tell us, how did you end up at NASA? I know that wasn't part of your original plan.
No, like many of, I think, guests that you've talked to, we've taken an interesting journey in our life. I started off wanting to fly airplanes. My brother and I, we live near an airport. We have the privilege of traveling around the world a lot because my our father was a diplomat, and so I was enthralled by that. And this was in the early days of jet aviation. I mean, because I'm a little older, so I wanted to do that. And so but I didn't. I'm not sure I knew how to approach it when I got into college. I just picked a major that sounded close to airplanes. It was aerospace engineering. And my brother actually studied journalism, even though he liked airplanes. But for
Hmm.
me, I my path took me to getting into the ROTC and the military, and I discovered that from a culture perspective, that didn't really align with me very well. I don't know why. It just didn't really. I didn't. We don't come from a military family or background. My father was, in World War II, but that seemed very distant to us. And so I went through a cathartic experience where I was rethinking, my future and my interest. And even though I liked engineering and studied it for a year, I changed totally, and I
Hmm.
went into a field because now I had traveled to Africa and Southeast Asia, and I had my eyes opened about the challenges of poverty and destitution and third world issues, and I wanted to dedicate, a lot of my time to those matters. And so I changed majors and I went on to graduate school and studied economic development. And my thesis was on Nigeria and how we were going to take advantage of all its oil wealth to develop. And so I was doing all of that until it finally dawned on me, like, oh wow, I need a job after I finished graduate school. I mean, I was taking advantage of my father's good nature and living with him and his second wife, and he was encouraging me about, okay, it's time to think about what's next. And so I found out through our university that I was going to about a program called the Presidential Management Intern Program that took a recent master's degree students and put them directly into mid-level careers in the federal government to do things. And I thought this was a good way to working with agencies that do work on development stuff. Well, it turns out that those agencies weren't really interested in the internship that I had, and out of the blue, because after going through this period of selection to be a presidential intern, all these federal agencies that had positions for us interns knew our names and our backgrounds. And out of the blue, I got a letter from NASA saying, we would like to interview you. And I was like, well, that's odd. I mean, I heard of NASA and that's cool, but wow, I hadn't studied aerospace since the Stone Age. I mean, why are they interested in me? And my father gave me good advice. He said, never turn down an opportunity to interview, even if you're not sure you want to do the job. It's always
Hmm.
good practice. So I did the interview, and I guess I did well because they called me the very next day, woke me up, and said, we would like to hire you. And I was still trying to forge other opportunities. And I told them that. I was very candid with the
Hmm.
interviewers. And after about 3 or 4 days, when they kept calling me, and then my dad said, son, this is an actual job that pays. You might want to think about it. And he said, besides, get your work experience. And after 3 or 4 years, you can use that work experience foundation to do something else. So that's what my plan was. And I started working with NASA, and I realized, hey, NASA's pretty cool, a lot of smart people, a lot of fun things. But I still had this idea that I'm going to go save the world, right?
Right.
And then Challenger happened in 1986. That was actually 37 years ago, a couple days ago,
Hmm.
actually.
Hmm.
And that's what really changed my focus in my future, because I had the privilege of being involved in some of the post Challenger activities, given my role. And I really saw how the nation rallied around
Hmm.
these fallen astronauts, particularly the teacher. And I decided I was going to make my career, because I realized that just because of the badge that I wore and the agency that I worked for, I could have a tremendous amount of influence. And I'm telling you, that influence continues even 6 years after I've retired from the agency.
Wow.
Because I'm a retired NASA senior executive, students will listen to me, early career professionals will listen to me, people, I get to be interviewed on fabulous podcasts by amazing people. And I appreciate that, because I feel comfortable now that I have something to offer.
Hmm.
And you when you found your calling, you're in the giving business,
Hmm.
Cheryl. You're in the business of giving wisdom and counsel to people to do better, to be
Hmm.
their better versions of themselves. And so we're in the same business, and
Hmm.
that's what called me eventually. That's what was nagging at me,
Yes.
was this is what I want to do. And so that's why I proudly wear my NASA flight jacket and wear my NASA pins and my NASA tie. I got all dressed up for you because
I
I'm
love it.
proud of
Thank you.
my agency and where I work. So
What I
that's how I got into NASA, and that's why I stayed.
what I love about your story is that people think that what's possible is limited to what they're thinking about themselves in that moment. And there's so many
Yes.
other possibilities you had in your mind, or you were trying to figure out a particular career, a direction that you were going to go into, but something else was knocking, and NASA
Yes.
started calling, and then you end up there
It
and
did.
having whole nother opportunities and career. And I just like to talk about that. I just like to talk about, the different types of possibilities that can occur just from being open.
Yes. Yes. Um, One thing that occurred to me midway through my career is that I didn't have to completely give up my interest in the affairs of developing countries or other countries. And so, through a variety of opportunities, I was able to, for example, work on a plan with an international organization to develop a African version of the European Space Agency called the
Hmm.
African Space Agency. Now, it didn't really come to pass on that, but the plan was actually socialized with the African Union, and different countries like Kenya and South Africa do have space agencies. And I've met people from those organizations. So I was able to involve myself in developing that, because one of the things that I learned from some of my NASA colleagues who
Hmm.
actually originally came from some African countries, particularly Nigeria, was that one of the reasons many students end up wanting to leave those countries is that there's not a lot of opportunities in those countries
Hmm.
to do their craft. And so I was interested in helping them develop a capability, an aerospace capability within their own country, so they can have, so they don't have a brain drain problem. So that
Hmm.
was one example. Another example was during my tenure as the education director at Ames Research Center, we developed an opportunity for students from other countries to be interns at NASA. Now, it may seem like a simple thing to do, but it's actually very difficult, because one of the main requirements by law is that you have to be an American citizen in order to
Hmm.
be a NASA intern. Well, we figured out a workaround for that, and we created an international student intern program where we had students from the United Arab Emirates, we had students from Morocco, we had students from France coming
Wow.
to NASA to do internships. So this was one way that I was able to still leverage some of my original interests in international affairs within the context of my NASA career. And so I'm a big believer in dabbling. I tell students, you have an opportunity to dabble in something different, try that. In fact, I had a Zoom meeting with a young mentee of mine. He's actually in Oman in the Middle East. He's a very bright young man, and he was asking me my opinion about doing certain things. And I said,
Hmm.
do them all.
Yep.
I mean, it doesn't matter if it's unusual, the experience is going to teach you something. Just like the gentleman you had who was, I think, the karate expert, he said sometimes that skill set can translate in an amazing way in
Yes.
other environments. So I've just been so fortunate. I mean, I can't say how fortunate I feel to have had the career I have. And so my goal now is to just leverage that, to share that, and hopefully that will resonate with people in a way that they can then empower themselves to see, there's a possibility that they may not even have seen. And so yeah,
I love
you can
I
tell I get real
No,
excited
you're
about
fine.
this.
I love the concept of dabbling because I also believe in that. I don't believe that we are meant to
Yeah.
be or do one thing. And I love how you
Yes.
you never let go of your core thoughts or core understanding of what it is that you wanted to do,
Yes.
and you found a way to connect it.
Yes.
I often
Yes.
tell stories of my youngest when at one point she was trying to decide, okay, do I want to go to law school, or do I want to be a chef, or do I want to know? And so she said,
Yeah.
what do you think? I said, do both. Do one and then do the other. No one
Yes.
says that you don't have
That's
that you
right.
have to do either or. We have the opportunity to evolve in life when we're just leaning into something. I think everything you just said was absolutely correct. We begin to learn from those experiences and they begin to shape our other
Yes,
opportunities that we have ahead of us. The other
they
reason
really do.
Mhm.
They really do.
The other reason why I wanted to speak with you, I was again, and I know you said it, NASA has opened so many doors for you. People want to talk to you. I did want to talk to you also because the concept for NASA for me is that from opportunities and possibilities, that's all that's there. Everybody's always trying new and different ideas. We may see the
Yes.
manifestation of something, such as a rocket launch, but that's after years of, planning and things can you speak to what that's like? I know part of your story is that you wrote one of the project plans for Artemis, right? So can you share a little bit more about that, and
Yes.
how does things come from ideation to execution?
So when I was selected to be a part of NASA's senior executive leadership team, on the path to that as a senior executive, that training involved working at different NASA facilities and going back to school and all of that. And one of the training rotational opportunities I had was to work at our Johnson Space Center in Houston, Texas. I worked at our NASA facility in California. And I was assigned to work in the project office for the Orion space capsule. And I didn't know what I was going to do. We talked notionally about a few things, but when I got there, the manager said, "Well, we need to have a project plan for Orion, and we'd like you to lead the effort to write that." And Cheryl, I remember the time I was sitting in his office, and all these thoughts were going through my head. I mean, the imposter syndrome, and like,
Yes.
oh my God, I'm not a practicing engineer. I mean, I'm thinking like this is some big, a spacecraft, at the plan, and what and so and he really put me at ease. He said, "Well, there are a lot of people who are involved in plans, and there's templates for the plans. You just have to follow the template and get a lot of people to write their parts. And there's some other things you have to do." And I thought, okay, well, I think I could do that. And so I did write the first project plan for the Orion spacecraft, and which just flew. We
Hmm.
successfully launched, and we're about ready to launch to go around the moon with Artemis 2, and then there'll be an astronaut crew after that that actually goes to the moon. I realized at the time that what um, I didn't know what I was capable of doing until I was challenged to do it.
Hmm.
And that's where all of the training that I learned, including from my mother about manners, including the requirement to have a team of people to support you, the desire, the need to ask questions and to follow plans and to work with people. And it was a very challenging thing. They were
Hmm.
changing the engineering requirements for plans, so I had to work with the team on who was doing that. And so um, I I felt that it really reminded me that when we think there are boundaries in our capabilities, I would invite people to question how real those boundaries are. And I actually
Hmm.
now do an exercise for workshops that I did, and I just did one, which is an exercise to understand where we imagine boundaries in our life. And
Hmm.
the exercise worked out beautifully because people saw boundaries that weren't there.
Right.
And I told the Orion story and I said, when you think that there is something that is not possible for you because of some boundary, I invite you to question that.
Yes.
And I invite you to consider the possibility that perhaps it doesn't really exist. Now, you may not have a particular skill that you need, but you can learn that skill. My younger brother is an airline pilot. He flies the most sophisticated commercial airplane ever built, the
Wow.
787 Dreamliner. And I can tell you that he had to have a lot of training and skill in order to fly that plane. But that plane is so sophisticated, Cheryl. It's practically like talking to Siri. He told me the story of his first flight. He was flying to Santiago, Chile, and he said, I never saw the runway until we touched down. And I was like, oh my God, did you practice that in the simulators? And what did you do? Was it scary? He goes, no. I just flipped on the auto land. The plane landed itself. I'm like, oh my God. You mean they pay you all this money and the plane just lands itself? But see, the message is that when things go wrong,
Mm-hmm.
you have to know what to do,
do.
right?
Exactly.
Because sometimes Siri ain't gonna work,
Right. Exactly.
You got to know how to
Exactly.
figure it out. So you have to have the mindset that when you're in the middle of something that's challenging, on how you're going to resolve a conflict and challenge. And so for me, that was one of several examples where, you know, my understanding of what the boundary was. Even my last job, as the Associate Administrator for Education, it's the highest rank you can get in federal government, short of being a political appointee. I mean, I worked for the man who was appointed by Barack Obama, so I was 2 degrees of freedom away from the president. And when I applied for the job, I didn't know this, but I found out later there was like 85 people that also applied for the job, 4 of whom were astronauts. And I was like, oh my goodness, how did I manage to do that? I'm not an astronaut. My predecessor was an astronaut. He's a great friend and a wonderful guy. And I was like, well, I still went to the interview and I acted as if I was just as qualified as any astronaut to do this job. I was very well prepared. And then I knew I might have had a chance when they said, well, what kind of leader do you think we're looking for? And I said, well, that's a great question. I was going to ask you that question too. And they said, you know, we don't really think we need another astronaut to do this job. We think we need to go in a different direction. And I said, I'm in. I might have a chance. And so but see, I could have bowed out earlier thinking I don't have a chance.
Exactly.
And so you never know until you actually apply.
And that's the reason why I love your story, because as you say, you'll go for it. You'll dabble. You're going to figure it out. I'm going to just give this a chance and give it a try. And we do talk ourselves out of stuff way before we get there. Some people talk themselves out of stuff before they even apply. They'll say, oh, I don't think I'm going to be able to get this I don't have this background. I don't have this. I don't know if I want to work there. How do you not know? Fill out the application. You know, do the interview, get to know, do a little homework on the organization. You never know. I love the concept of pushing past those boundaries in your mind. I'm curious a little bit about your workshop, and I'm curious about what you say to people to help them get past the boundaries that they may have that they don't even realize that they have.
So I started the workshop with a pop quiz that I did with the famous exercise that many people have done. It's called the 9-dot exercise. And if you can imagine an array of 9 dots, 3 dots at the top, 3 in the middle, 3 at the bottom. And so I have 2 envelopes, and in one envelope, the requirement is to connect all the dots with 4 straight lines without taking your pencil off the paper or backtracking. And in the other envelope is the same exercise, but do it with 3 lines. And so what I do is I give them 60 seconds to do this test. And this was 30 people, and I watched them, and I noticed that even though the rules only said, once you put your pencil on the paper, don't take it off. When you go in one direction, don't backtrack over that, connect all the dots, and they have to be 4 straight lines. What I noticed is nobody talked to each other. Nobody Googled it. Nobody said, hey, how do you do this? I asked in the debrief, I said, did anybody think of asking your colleagues about how to do this? They said, well, we thought we had to do it on our own. And I said, well, where did that rule come from? Was that on the piece of paper? And they realized it wasn't. And so the 4-line solution can be done within the confines of the piece of paper, but the 3-line solution cannot. So now not only do you have the visual of the 9 dots, just the 9 dots on a white piece of paper with it, which looks like an imaginary square with an imaginary boundary, which really isn't there, which is how do you do the line solution. You have the piece of paper itself, even the room itself, which is an imaginary boundary, which is how you do the 3-line solution. And so I used that throughout the rest of the workshop to talk about and I got notes from people. I mean, people were in tears later on, thinking
Yes.
I didn't realize how much I did this to myself,
Yes, we
right?
do.
How much I said, I can't, it's not possible, whatever it is, there's a language issue and all this stuff.
Yep.
And I said, and I usually ended by talking about one of my favorite famous astronauts, Jose Hernandez, who was a migrant farm worker, born in a migrant farm working community in Central California. And Jose wanted to be an engineer. He became an engineer. He wanted to be an astronaut. And the long short story of Jose's story is he tried 11 times,
Mm.
applied 11 times to be an astronaut,
Mm.
and kept getting no. And he said, well, let's see. Let me go figure out what astronauts have that I don't have. Well, they all speak Russian. Well, I'm going to learn how to speak Russian. Well, they all know how to sail. I'm going to learn how to sail. They know how to scuba dive. He just kept going.
Wow.
He talk about tenacity.
Yes.
And this is a guy who
Perseverance.
wasn't born speaking English
Mm.
as a first language. It's a great, great story and a great example of where barriers just are really meaningless.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that things are going to be almost impossible, right? Or challenging, but don't do it to yourself.
Exactly. Don't exactly. You know, it's so funny. I love this. I love that I love that exercise because usually I can tell what a person is talking themselves, what a person wants to do based upon what they're talking themselves out of, right? Like, and
Yeah.
because everybody's, I don't know what I want to, I don't know. What are you talking yourself out of? That's how I know you know what you want to do, but you don't really believe in the possibility of it getting done. So you're creating that
Yeah.
boundary before you even get there. And I think the exercise, the 9 dot exercise, is a great example of that. And I remember doing the 9 dot exercise a long time ago, back when I was in school. But we never tied. It was never that concept. Boundaries was never tied to that for me. So that's really quite interesting.
Yes.
So
Yes.
can you tell us a little bit more
Yes.
about that?
Yes. It started after a talk I gave to a group of NASA interns when, at the question and answer session, a young man, and this was 2 months after I retired from NASA, a young man asked me if I could go back in time to when I was a young intern,
Mm-hmm.
but with the benefit of the wisdom and knowledge that I know now, what would I advise my younger self? And I acknowledged the question. I thought that was really great. And I said, I would tell my younger self to really remember and heed the advice of what my mother, taught us,
Mm-hmm.
which was manners will take you where brains and money won't. And what my mother meant by that is it doesn't matter how rich you are, it doesn't matter how smart you are, if you don't have your manners right, you could be in for a rough ride.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the seed. And then 2 months after that talk, my mother unexpectedly died.
Mm-hmm.
And I was looking in my grief, I was looking for a way of honoring my mother. And then it dawned on me to write about that as a
Mm-hmm.
longer answer to that young man's question. And so the following February, I began in earnest. And then in February of 21, I published the book. And I spend some time saying to people, you have to understand that when I talk about manners, I'm not just talking about politeness and
Mm-hmm.
civility, the please and thank you stuff. Now, that's important.
Mm-hmm.
It's important to be manly in that way, but I look at it much more broadly. And so I write about how we show up in the world
Mm-hmm.
and how we show up to the world. It's how we speak. It's how we listen. It's our body language.
Mm-hmm.
It's our energy. It's how we manage those things that hold us back. It's how we react to things,
Mm-hmm.
right? Other people might language it differently. This is just how I language it. And I say, if you really get that right, so you imagine a triangle. On one side of the triangle of your career in life is ambition. you have to have some degree of ambition just to move you forward. Now, there's
Mm-hmm.
some people who are not very ambitious, and that's okay. They just want to do what they're doing forever and
Right.
retire, and that's cool. On the other side of the triangle is competence, and competence involves all the things that are required to do whatever you're going to do well, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's a range of skills involved in that. And I envision that the bottom of the triangle is your manners, which is all of those things that govern how you show up in
Mm-hmm.
the world in relationship to other people.
Mm-hmm.
Because I have seen too many times people not getting that right. And I
Right.
tell stories, I give examples in the
Mm-hmm.
book of where that is. And so I implore particularly early career professionals who are looking to move up in their world to look at manners as a skill set
Mm-hmm.
that you can cultivate and develop and hone in a way that's really organic so that people want give people an excuse to help you.
Yes.
Don't give them a reason to not help you,
Mm.
right? um, and I talk about, being smart isn't good enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I can attest to that. Everybody at NASA is pretty smart. I mean, I kind of snuck in there. I mean, I was okay, but I was
No,
reasonably
I'm
smart.
sure
But I
you're
wasn't like,
smart. No, you have to. You're
MIT.
writing
I
project
wasn't.
plans and mapping everything out. You're smart.
I didn't know any better. Like I didn't know any better. But the point is, they're all smart.
Right.
But why is it that some people are successful and some people are not? It's not because of their brains. And
Right.
Cheryl, you know people who are very smart who are depressed and not happy,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
You know people who are rich and not happy. I mean, they
Mm-hmm.
commit suicide because they know that money isn't it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying money is bad.
Right.
Money's fine, but money's a means to an end.
Right.
I do another exercise around that too
Mm-hmm.
to try to get at that.
Mm-hmm.
So if you really understand what it is that's important to you, then the other things will fall into place. So that's why I wrote the book, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why I'm proud to share it because I want people young people, particularly people who are at a disadvantage. I had a lot of advantages,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that. But there are a lot of people who don't have any advantages, and I want to erase from them the one disadvantage that they might have inadvertently so that they can really make it. And I've seen that happen.
And the advantage that will put them on top. It's one of the best skills that you can ever
Yes,
learn. I totally agree with it. When I
yes.
heard the title, I was like, this makes sense to me. And I think it's definitely something that is needed. I'm definitely going to make sure I pick up my copy. It's called Manners Will Take You Where
Thank you.
Brains and Money Won't. Lessons from 35 Years at NASA and Mama's Wisdom. I can't tell you how excited I am to have had this conversation. I can think of at least 10 other conversations I would like to have with you, especially tied to the book, but I'll talk to you a little bit after the recording on that one. But if people want to be able to find you, to connect with you,
Yes.
where can they find you?
I'm delighted to connect with people. I do have a website. It's my full name, DonaldGregoryJames.com. And you can see the book there. And there's a place you can contact me through the website, DonaldGregoryJames.com. I'm also delighted to have people just email me. It's actually the first part of the book, Manners Will Take You at gmail.com.
Manners
Manners
Will
Will
Take
Take
You.
You at gmail.com. I answer all emails, and I love to connect with people and talk about, if they want some coaching and I don't charge for any of this. This is
Mm-hmm.
just what I do. This is what I love to do. And so if you're a person who wants to aspire to things and are looking for some ideas, I'm happy to help. So thank you
The,
so much for the honor of having this.
I'm really excited
Let's do it
about it.
again,
We
all right?
definitely need
Read
to.
read the book and then call me
I
back and
definitely
challenge me on
will.
stuff.
I
I
don't
would
know.
like to
I
do
don't know if I'll
more.
challenge you on it. I think I might agree with a lot of it,
You
but
can.
but there is one I did forget to ask my most important question.
Yeah.
Well, all of them are important, but our team has had this conversation about the word envision, and do people really
Yes.
understand what the word envision means? And so I like to ask every guest, what does the word envision mean to you?
To me, it means taking a deep breath, being still, and really listening to your heart and have your heart tell you the truth about what's so.
Mm-hmm.
And what's so in the context of possibility?
Mm-hmm.
What's the possibility that we can transform violence just simply by how we show up in the world? What's the possibility that people who are marginalized and otherwise forgotten can be included and loved and welcomed?
Mm-hmm.
And it sounds easy, but it's hard sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
I have sometimes I walk down the street, Cheryl, and I have to stop myself because I will look at somebody that I may judge as homeless, and I might have a first reaction
Reaction.
like, oh God. And then I said, what do you, I mean, by the grace of God go I. So I will stop, I'll turn, I will look at the person, I'll sometimes say a prayer
Yes.
and just remember that they are human beings too.
Absolutely.
And they deserve because they're human beings, they're deserving and worthy of our love and respect, just like I am deserving and worthy of others' love and respect.
Yes.
And so listen to your heart, and that will give you your roadmap to your mountain.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many paths to that mountain, but you have to be still and let it bubble up, and you'll see it. That's what it means to me.
That was a wonderful answer. Listen to your heart, and it'll give you the road back to to your mountain. I love that. Thank you so much,
Yes.
Donald. I cannot tell you how exciting this conversation has been for me. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your wisdom.
You're welcome.
I appreciate your service, everything that you've done. Thank you for bringing your light to the world.
You're welcome. My pleasure and my honor.